That was my first thought when I walked through the front door of my parents' house after 21 days at the hospital. Not relief, not exhaustion, not the bone-deep grief that had been living in my chest for 3 weeks like something with weight and teeth. Just a quiet, immediate wrongness. The hallway looked different. The shoes by the door were not mine. A pair of men's boots, brown leather, size 11. A woman's white sneakers beside them with a pink stripe along the sole. A child's backpack I did not recognize hanging from the coat hook where June's small pink jacket used to be. I stood there for a moment, holding my own jacket, still wearing the clothes I had put on 3 weeks ago before everything fell apart. My hair was unwashed. I smelled like the hospital. That particular combination of antiseptic and recycled air and the faint staleness of vending machine coffee that clings to your skin after days inside fluorescent rooms. Then I walked down the hall to the bedroom at the end, the one June and I shared, past the bathroom, past the linen closet, the room my parents had given us 2 years ago when I moved back home with my daughter because I could not afford anything else. The door was closed. I opened it. Someone else was living there. A single bed, where our 2 mattresses had been, pushed side by side on the floor because there was not enough room for a proper frame. A suitcase open on the carpet, clothes spilling out in casual piles. A jacket hanging on the back of the door. The walls were completely bare. No drawings June had taped up with careful strips of adhesive tape. No photographs? No, the small, carefully arranged collection of objects we had placed on the windowsill to make the space feel like ours. A ceramic elephant June had painted at school. A photograph of the 2 of us at the beach, squinting into the sun. A small potted plant I had been trying to keep alive for months. All gone. Just a stranger's temporary belongings in a room that had been ours for 2 years. I stood in the doorway and looked at this for a long time. The morning light was coming through the window, falling across the stranger's suitcase, the stranger's jacket, the stranger's life arranged casually in the space where my daughter and I had slept. Then I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. "Oh, you are back. Come have coffee. I just made a fresh pot." You need to understand the situation before you can understand what happened next. So let me take you back. My name is Elise Monroe. I was 28 years old when my world was dismantled while I was not looking. I had a daughter named June. She was 7, with dark curly hair and a laugh that sounded like small bells and a way of looking at the world that made everything seem worth paying attention to. June had been diagnosed with acute viral myocarditis when she was 6. Her heart muscle became inflamed after a common childhood illness, one of those bugs that most kids shake off in a week with soup and rest. June did not shake it off. The inflammation spread through the muscle tissue of her heart like fire through dry wood. By the time we reached the emergency room, her heart had stopped beating on its own. They saved her. Machines kept her alive while medications fought the inflammation. But it was close, closer than I want to think about, even now, years later, sitting in a quiet room with her beside me, healthy and whole. After the initial emergency, June was stabilized in the intensive care unit. Mechanical ventilation, intravenous medications administered around the clock, a team of cardiologists and pediatric specialists monitoring every number on every screen. The doctors told me she would need weeks, possibly months, of intensive care before they could even begin to assess the long-term damage to her heart. Weeks, in a hospital, with machines breathing for my 7-year-old daughter. I had been living with my parents, Richard and Carol Monroe, for 2 years by then. I moved back after June's father left, not in a dramatic way. He simply stopped showing up one Tuesday and moved to another state and stopped answering his phone. June was 4. She stopped asking about him after a while, the way children do when they learn that some questions do not have answers that will make them feel better. My parents' house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a suburb where the lawns were mowed on Saturdays and the neighbors waved from their driveways. Richard worked as an insurance adjuster for a regional company. Carol worked part-time at a dental office. They were comfortable, not wealthy, but stable in the way that people with steady employment and a paid-off mortgage are stable. They gave June and me the room at the end of the hall. It was small, barely large enough for 2 mattresses on the floor and a dresser, but it was something, a place to sleep, a place that was ours, in a house that belonged to someone else. I paid them $200 a month in rent, all I could afford on my part-time wages from the grocery store where I worked while finishing my education degree online. But I paid it, because paying rent meant I was not entirely dependent. It meant there was some dignity in the arrangement. some transaction that made me a tenant rather than simply a burden being housed out of obligation. My brother Daniel lived 20 minutes away. He was 32, unmarried, employed in marketing at a company that paid him well enough to afford a one-bedroom apartment with good furniture and a car newer than anything I had ever driven. He came to Sunday dinners at my parents' house. He brought wine. He told stories that made my father laugh. He was the son my parents had always understood instinctively, the one they knew how to celebrate. I was the daughter they had never quite figured out. The pattern was established long before June was born. Daniel was athletic where I was quiet, social where I was reserved, confident where I was careful. My parents loved him in the easy, visible way that some parents love certain children, with enthusiasm and pride and the constant, effortless attention that comes from recognizing yourself in someone else. With me, they were simply lost, or perhaps they did not bother trying to find their way. I was 13 when I understood this clearly for the first time. It happened the year I won the regional science fair. I had spent 6 months on my project, a study on water filtration methods using locally sourced materials. I was proud of it in the way that children are proud of things that took real effort and produced real results. My teacher had told me it was exceptional, had used that exact word. The night of the awards ceremony, my parents did not come. Daniel had a basketball game that same evening. They chose the basketball game. I won first place, stood on a small stage in the school gymnasium and accepted the trophy from the judge, looked out at the audience for my parents' faces. They were not there. I drove myself home, carried the trophy inside, set it on the kitchen counter where they would see it in the morning. My mother saw it the next day, glanced at it while pouring her coffee. "Oh, that is nice," she said. Then she went to work. That was the moment I understood. Not that they did not love me, but that my life, my achievements, my struggles, these things simply did not occupy the same space in their attention that Daniel's did. I was peripheral, expected to manage on my own because I always had, because it was easier than paying attention. I stopped expecting anything different. When June got sick, I called my parents from the emergency room at 2 in the morning. My mother answered on the 4th ring. I told her what was happening. My daughter's heart, the machines, the way the doctors moved around the room with a controlled urgency that told me more than their words did. "We will come in the morning," Carol said. "Try to get some rest." Rest. In an emergency room. While my daughter was dying somewhere behind double doors I was not allowed through. They came the next afternoon, sat with me in the waiting room for an hour. Carol had brought a casserole in a Tupperware container, which I set on the plastic chair beside me and did not touch. "You should go home and sleep," Richard said. "We will stay here for a while." They did not stay. I checked the visitor log later. They had signed in at 2:15 and signed out at 3:47, 92 minutes. Then they drove home and had dinner and watched television and went to bed, while my daughter breathed through a machine in a room full of fluorescent light. I stayed. For 3 weeks I stayed, sleeping in the chairs outside the ICU. The hard plastic ones with the thin cushions that never quite supported your body no matter how you positioned yourself. Eating whatever I could find in the vending machines down the hall. Showering in the family bathroom when the nurses gently suggested I needed to. Holding June's hand and talking to her and watching the monitors and breathing with her, in and out, matching my breath to the rhythm of the ventilator because it was the only thing I could do. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and recycled air and the particular institutional warmth of a building that never fully cooled down. The lights were always on. Time moved strangely there, days bleeding into nights without clear boundaries. I lost track of the date. I lost track of everything except June's numbers on the screen and the sound of the machines keeping her alive. On the 4th day, Richard called. "Elise, we want to help," he said. "The medical bills are going to be enormous. Insurance will cover a portion, but not everything. We think we should set up a fundraising page." "What kind of fundraising page?" "GoFundMe. You have seen them before. People donate. Sometimes strangers donate a great deal when the story is compelling enough. A child in the hospital is very compelling. I do not know how to set one up. You do not need to. I will handle everything. You focus on June. We will take care of the rest. All of it." I was so exhausted I could barely form coherent sentences. The idea that someone was going to handle something, anything, while I sat in this hospital and breathed with my daughter, felt like being given water after weeks in a desert. "Okay," I said. "Thank you, Dad. I will keep you updated on how much we raise. Just focus on your girl. Richard called every few days with updates. We have raised about $800 so far. People are donating, but it is slow. 3 days later, we are at 1,500 now. It is hard to get traction with these campaigns. There is so much competition. A week after that, about 30 to 100 total. Every little bit helps. We are doing what we can. I did not question the numbers. I did not check the page myself. I was surviving on 3 hours of sleep and cold coffee and the desperate, hourly hope that the next set of numbers on June's monitor would be better than the last. The fundraising existed in a world I was not currently part of. A world where normal problems lived. Money, logistics, the mechanics of asking strangers for help. I was in a different world entirely. The world of an ICU waiting room, where the only thing that mattered was whether my daughter would breathe on her own again. I trusted my parents. They were handling it. That was enough. On the 19th day, the cardiologist told me June's heart was stabilizing, not healed, not out of danger entirely, but improving. The inflammation was receding. The muscle tissue was beginning to recover. The ventilator settings had been reduced twice in the past week. Her oxygen levels were holding steady without as much mechanical support. The doctor used the word encouraging, and I cried in the family bathroom for 20 minutes afterward because it was the first genuinely good news I had heard in almost 3 weeks, and my body did not know how to receive it without breaking apart. June was moved out of the ICU and into a step-down unit 2 days later, still hooked up to monitors, still receiving medication, still fragile in the way that recovering bodies are fragile. Like something held together with careful hands that could fall apart if you were not gentle enough. But she was awake. She knew where she was. She knew I was there. She opened her eyes on a Thursday morning and looked at me, and her face did the thing it always does when she sees me, that quiet settling, that recognition of safety. "Mama," she said. Her voice was thin, barely there, scraped raw from the ventilator tube that had been in her throat for days. "I am here," I said. "I am right here." I held her hand. Her fingers curled around mine, small and warm, and I understood with absolute clarity what mattered in the world and what did not. On the 21st day, the doctors told me June could be discharged within a week if she continued to improve. They gave me paperwork, instructions for follow-up care, a list of specialists she would need to see. I needed to go home. I needed to shower properly. I needed to get clothes for June to wear when she came home. I needed to exist briefly in the normal world again. I called my mother. "I need to come back for a few hours," I said. "I need to shower. Get some things for June." "Of course," Carol said. "Come whenever you like." And that is how I ended up standing in the doorway of a room that no longer belonged to me. I walked back to the kitchen. My mother was at the counter, pouring coffee into a mug I did not recognize, a white ceramic thing with small blue flowers around the rim. The kitchen smelled like dark roast, and beneath it, faintly, a perfume that was not hers. "Who is living in our room?" I asked. Carol set down the coffee pot, turned to face me with an expression of practiced composure. "The Hendersons," she said. "Patricia Henderson and her daughter Emma. Patricia is a friend of your father's from the office. She needed a place to stay temporarily. We had the space. You had the space because June and I were at the hospital. You have been gone for 3 weeks, Elise. We could not just leave that room sitting empty. Where are our things? We put some of it in the garage, in boxes. Some of it we donated. You had not worn half of those clothes in months, and June has outgrown most of hers. It seemed wasteful to keep them. You donated June's clothes, the ones that did not fit anymore. There is no point holding on to things no one will wear." I stood there, in the kitchen where I had eaten breakfast every morning for 18 years of childhood and another 2 years of adult life. The morning light was coming through the window above the sink, the same light that had been there my entire life, falling across the same counter, the same tile floor. "Where will June and I sleep when she comes home?" I asked. "Well, that is something we need to figure out. Patricia is paying us rent, which is helpful. And honestly, Elise, you should probably start looking for your own place. June is getting older. She needs stability. A real home, not a room in her grandparents' house. You are telling me to move out. I am telling you to think about the future. You cannot live here forever." I looked at my mother, at the unfamiliar mug in her hand, at the kitchen that had been the center of my childhood. "You are standing here upset about a room," Carol said. Her voice shifted. The warmth drained out of it, replaced by something harder, something that sounded almost like impatience. While your daughter is in a hospital bed, I thought June was the priority, Elise. I thought that was why you have been there for 3 weeks. If she is what matters most, why are you here arguing about furniture? The words landed exactly where they were designed to land, in the narrow space between guilt and grief, where there was no room for anything else, where questioning her became the same as not caring about June. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I did not point out that a mother can care about her child's survival and still need a place to bring her home to. That having a roof over your head is not separate from wanting your daughter to live. I simply looked at my mother and said nothing. Carol held my gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to her coffee, and the conversation was over. I went into the garage. The storage boxes were stacked against the far wall, 2 of them loosely packed. Someone had gone through them carelessly, tossing things in without folding or organizing. I opened the first box and found June's clothes, wrinkled and jumbled. The second box held a few of my things and some of June's belongings. I went through everything carefully, methodically, cataloging what was there and what was not. June's favorite stuffed rabbit was not there. A worn brown thing she had slept with every night since she was 3, its fur soft and matted from years of being held. Gone. Her school backpack was not there. The ceramic elephant she had painted at school, the one she had placed on our windowsill with such care, was not there. The photograph of the 2 of us at the beach was not there. I packed what remained into a single box, carried it to my car, set it in the back seat. Then I sat in the driveway with my hands on the steering wheel and the engine off, and I thought about something. The fundraising page. I had not looked at it once in 3 weeks. Not once. Richard had been giving me updates, and I had accepted them without question because I had no reason not to. He was my father. He was helping. That was the story I had been telling myself. But something had shifted in me. Standing in that empty room, something small had cracked, a hairline fracture in the foundation of trust I had placed in my parents, and now I could feel the cold air coming through it. I pulled out my phone, opened the browser, typed GoFundMe and searched for the campaign Richard had created. It was titled Help Save Little June, Fighting for Our Granddaughter's Life. There was a photograph of June from last summer, smiling, missing her front teeth, squinting into the sun with her whole body, the way she did when she was happy. The total raised was displayed at the top of the page in large, bold numbers. $47,000. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. $47,000. Richard had told me $3,200. I clicked through the page. The donations were listed individually, hundreds of them. People I did not know, strangers from cities I had never visited who had seen the story of a sick child and opened their wallets because her life mattered to them. Comments underneath each donation. Prayers for little June. No child should have to fight this hard. Sending love to your family. Hope this helps. Stay strong. $47,000. Donated by strangers. To save my daughter. And my father had told me $1,500, then $3,200. Numbers designed to seem believable. Small enough that I would not be surprised. Large enough that I would not feel guilty about not raising more. I set down my phone, looked at the steering wheel, felt the cold air moving through the crack in everything I had believed about my family. I drove back to the hospital that afternoon without stopping at the house again. I sat beside June's bed for 2 hours, watching her sleep. The monitors beeped in their steady rhythm. Her breathing was even, assisted now only by a thin cannula delivering oxygen to her nose. She looked small in the hospital bed, thinner than she had been before the illness, but alive and improving. I held her hand and thought about $47,000. That night, I started looking, not at the GoFundMe page again, at the money itself, where it had gone. Richard had given me the GoFundMe login credentials weeks earlier, casually, in case I needed to update the page. I had never used them. Now I logged in and read every transaction record, every deposit, every payout. The platform had paid out the funds in 3 installments, standard procedure, directly to the bank account Richard had provided when he created the campaign, his personal checking account. I then accessed that account. Richard had added my name to it years ago during a family emergency and never removed me. I had not looked at it in months. The deposits were there, $47,000, arriving in 3 installments over 2 weeks. The withdrawals told a story I did not want to read. $12,000 to a credit card company, Richard's credit card. I checked the statement. The balance had been $11,000 before the first deposit. After the payment, It was near zero. $8,500 to a travel agency. I checked the dates against my memory. The second week after June was admitted to the hospital, Richard and Carol had taken a 4-day trip to Sedona. They had posted photographs on Facebook. Sunset over red rocks, a spa with white towels, a restaurant with white tablecloths and candles. I had seen those posts while I was sitting in a plastic chair outside the ICU, and I had thought, they are stressed. They deserve a break. I had not questioned it. $6,000 transferred to Daniel. A single payment with the note loan repayment. I called Daniel later and asked about it. He told me his rent had been late and Richard had helped him out. He did not know where the money came from. He did not ask. The rest of the withdrawals were smaller but no less clear. Groceries, utilities, a new television purchased at an electronics store the week after the second deposit, car maintenance, Carol's dental work. Every single dollar spent on things that had nothing to do with June. I sat at the small desk in the hospital's family lounge, my laptop open, the screen casting blue light across my face in the dim room, and I read through every transaction twice, then a third time. Then I closed the laptop and sat very still for a long time. I spent 4 days gathering evidence. Screenshots of the GoFundMe page showing the total raised. Screenshots of the transaction records. Bank statements showing where every dollar went. The email Richard had sent to GoFundMe support team the day after the first payout, which read, "Thank you for the quick processing. The funds have been received and will be used as intended for my granddaughter's medical care, as intended." I found this email by searching Richard's inbox, using a password I had known since I was 14 and which he had never changed. I felt no guilt about accessing it. The guilt was somewhere else entirely, and it belonged to someone else. I also saved screenshots of Richard and Carol's social media posts from the Sedona trip, the spa, the restaurant, the sunset photographs with captions like "finally taking some time for ourselves and we deserve this." I saved everything. Screenshots, bank records, email copies. I backed them up on 2 separate devices and emailed copies to myself. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Margaret Tran, a family law and fraud attorney that the hospital's social worker had recommended after I told her quietly what I had found. The social worker had gone very still when I explained the situation. Then she had written a name and number on a piece of paper and handed it to me and said, "Call her before you do anything else." Margaret was precise and unhurried and completely without sentimentality. "Walk me through everything," she said at our first meeting. A small office downtown. Books on the shelves, a window that looked out on a gray afternoon. I sat across from her desk and told her the entire story. The GoFundMe, the money, the room, the storage boxes, the missing belongings. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, reading through the documents I had brought. "This is fraud," she said finally. "Straightforward, well-documented fraud. The donations were solicited from the public specifically for your daughter's medical care. Your father represented them as such to the platform and to the donors. He then spent the funds on personal expenses. What are my options? We can report the fraud directly to GoFundMe. They have a dedicated fraud investigation team and strict policies about misuse of campaign funds. We can also file a police report. This qualifies as criminal fraud given the amount and the circumstances. And we can file a civil suit to recover the stolen funds. How long will it take? The GoFundMe complaint and the police report can be filed immediately. The civil suit will take longer. But Elise, I want you to understand something before we proceed. What? Once this becomes public, it will become very public. Fraud cases involving charitable donations to sick children attract significant media attention. Your parents' names will be in the news. I thought about June, in her hospital bed, alive because strangers had cared enough to send money that never reached her. "I understand," I said. "File everything." Margaret filed the GoFundMe fraud complaint on a Monday, the police report on Tuesday, the civil suit on Wednesday. I did not tell Richard or Carol what was happening. I did not call them. I did not go back to the house. I did not confront them about the money or the room or any of it. I simply let the process run. June was discharged from the hospital on a Thursday. I had found a temporary place to stay by then. A college friend named Sarah had a spare room in her apartment and had offered it without hesitation when I told her the situation. It was small. June and I slept on an air mattress on the floor, but it was ours. No one was going to give it away while we were not looking. I carried June out of the hospital in my arms. She was lighter than she should have been, thinner from weeks of illness and limited eating, but she was smiling. Smiling the way she smiled when something good was happening, which was often because June had always seen the world as a place where good things were possible. "Mama, look at the sky," she said, as I carried her toward the parking lot. It was late afternoon. The sky was turning gold at the edges, the particular warm light of early autumn that makes everything look softer than it actually is. "I see it," I said. "It is beautiful." "Yes," I said, "it is." The GoFundMe platform responded within 48 hours of Margaret's complaint. Their fraud investigation team reviewed the evidence Margaret had provided, the bank statements, the transaction records, the email Richard had sent promising the funds would be used as intended. The evidence was unambiguous. GoFundMe issued a public statement on their website. It identified the campaign by name, confirmed that fraud had been detected, and stated that the platform was cooperating fully with law enforcement. The statement did not name Richard or Carol directly, but it named the campaign, Help Save Little June. Anyone who had donated to that campaign could look it up, could see the organizer's name, could understand exactly what had happened to their money. The news picked it up within a week. A reporter at the local paper had seen the GoFundMe statement and done her own research. The story was everything that draws media attention: a seriously ill child, generous strangers opening their wallets, and grandparents who had taken every dollar meant to save her life. The article ran on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. By Thursday, it was on the local television news. By Friday, 2 national outlets had picked it up and run their own versions. I did not read the articles, not at first. Margaret sent me brief updates, and I trusted her to handle the public-facing elements of the case. I was focused on June, on her follow-up appointments, on the medication schedules and the dietary restrictions and the slow, careful work of helping my daughter recover. But I knew what was happening. I could feel it the way you feel a storm approaching even when you cannot see it yet. The pressure in the air changing, something enormous moving toward the people who had caused this. Richard and Carol's world came apart quietly at first, and then all at once. Their neighbors read the article. The couple who had lived next door for 15 years stopped waving when they saw Richard in the driveway. A woman down the street, who had always brought cookies at Christmas, posted something on social media about the importance of protecting vulnerable children. She did not name anyone. She did not need to. Carol's employer at the dental office called her in on a Monday morning. Carol did not come back to work after that. The details of what was said in that meeting were never shared with me, and I did not ask. Richard's colleagues at the insurance company read the article. The irony was not lost on anyone. An insurance adjuster, a man whose entire career was built on assessing claims and determining what was legitimate, had defrauded a charitable campaign set up to save his own granddaughter's life. Someone in the office, according to Margaret, had printed the article and left it on his desk. Daniel called me once, in the middle of all of it. "Did you do this?" he asked. "I reported the fraud," I said. "Your father stole $47,000 that people donated to save June's life. I reported it. Mom and Dad are saying you are exaggerating. They are saying the money was going to go to the medical bills eventually, that you just jumped the gun. There is no eventually. The money is spent on a vacation, on your rent, on a television, on things that have nothing to do with June." He was quiet for a long time. "I did not know," he said finally. "I know you did not know, but $6,000 of that money went to you, Daniel. That was June's money. Money people sent because she was dying." Another silence. "I will pay it back," he said. "That is between you and the court." I hung up. The police investigation moved forward steadily. Richard was charged with fraud in the first degree. Carol was charged as an accomplice. The amounts involved and the circumstances, charitable donations solicited under false pretenses from the general public, made the charges serious. Margaret kept me informed without overwhelming me. The investigation was proceeding. The evidence was solid. The case would go to trial. I did not attend any hearings. I did not go to court. I did not speak to Richard or Carol. I let the truth move through the world on its own. In November, I moved into an apartment, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window that looked out over a small courtyard where someone had planted marigolds that were still blooming despite the cold. The rent was manageable. Margaret had secured a portion of the recovered funds for living expenses while the civil case was ongoing, and my part-time wages covered the rest. June picked out her bedroom. She wanted the one with the bigger window. "It lets in more sky," she said, standing in the doorway, looking at the rectangle of gray autumn light falling across the bare floor. We painted her room together on a Saturday afternoon, pale yellow, the color of sunlight. June stood on a step stool and painted broad stripes along the wall while I did the careful work along the edges and corners. We got paint on the floor and on each other and on June's nose, and she laughed, and the apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility. When we were done, we sat on the floor in the middle of the room, surrounded by the smell of drying paint and the quiet satisfaction of having made something that was entirely ours. Mama June said, "Yes, I like this room. I am glad. It feels safe." I looked at her, at my daughter, at this small, resilient person who had been through something no child should ever have to endure, and was already looking at the world again with wonder and curiosity and the unshakable belief that good things were coming. "It is safe," I said. "I promise you, it is safe." The trial was held in January. I was not there. Margaret handled my interests through the civil proceedings. The criminal case was managed by the state prosecutor's office. I did not need to be in that courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming and spoke entirely for itself. The verdict came back on a Friday afternoon. Guilty, on all counts. Margaret called me while I was at the park with June. It was cold, the kind of January cold that makes the air feel sharp and thin, but June did not seem to notice. She was on the swings, pumping her legs, trying to go higher, her face turned up toward the pale winter sky. "It is done," Margaret said. "I know. Are you all right?" I watched June swing, the arc of her body against the gray, the sound of the chains creaking with each push, the way she laughed when she went high enough to feel weightless for just a moment. "Yes," I said, "I am all right. I have not spoken to Richard or Carol since before the trial. I do not know where they are now, what remains of the life they had. Margaret tells me the judgment has been entered. The process of collecting what can be collected is ongoing and will likely continue for years. I do not think about them often. When I do, I think about a woman in a kitchen, pouring coffee, telling her daughter to stop worrying about a room while her child was in a hospital bed. I think about the precise cruelty of that, the way it was constructed to make me feel guilty for having needs while my daughter was suffering. And I think about a man who set up a page on the internet and wrote "Help Save Little June" and asked strangers to help keep his granddaughter alive, who watched the money come in, who took it and spent it on himself and his family and a vacation to the desert. There is no version of that story where they are anything other than what they are. There is no explanation that makes it anything else. June is 8 now. She is healthy. The myocarditis did not leave permanent damage, according to her cardiologist, though she will need monitoring for years. She goes to school. She makes friends. She comes home and tells me about her day in the breathless, detailed way that children do when the world is still new enough to be endlessly surprising. She does not remember much about the hospital. Children are merciful that way. She remembers being scared. She remembers me being there. She remembers waking up and seeing my face above her. "You were always there," she told me once, matter-of-factly, the way children state things they believe to be obvious. "Yes," I said, "I was always there." She does not know yet what her grandparents did. I will tell her someday, when she is old enough to understand. Not to make her hate them, but to make sure she understands that love is not a word. It is a choice, made every day, in every small decision, in every moment when it would be easier to look away and someone chooses to look. The people who donated to that GoFundMe page made that choice. Strangers, every one of them. They saw a child in danger and they acted without hesitation. My parents made a different choice. I finished my education degree last spring. I teach second grade now, at an elementary school 10 minutes from our apartment. The classroom smells like crayons and the warm, particular dustiness of a room full of small bodies. The children are loud and messy and endlessly demanding, and I love every single one of them. June visits my classroom sometimes after school, while I am cleaning up. She sits at one of the tiny desks and draws pictures while I stack chairs and wipe down tables. She looks perfectly at home there, as if the room was made for her. The money that people donated was meant for June, for her survival, for the machines and the medications and the weeks of care that kept her alive when her own heart could not do the job. My parents tried to take that, not just the dollars, but the meaning behind them. The proof that the world contains people who will help when a child is in danger. People who will open their wallets for someone they have never met, because a child's life is worth something. But the proof came back. After the fraud was exposed, GoFundMe launched a new campaign on June's behalf, managed directly by the platform. Within 2 weeks, it raised over $60,000. People who had seen the news, who knew the money had been stolen once, donated again. Because June's life was still worth fighting for. Because that had never changed. That is not something you can steal. June and I are in the courtyard now. The small space behind our apartment where the marigolds bloom in orange and gold. It is spring again. The air is warm and smells like earth and the green freshness of things growing after a long winter. June is drawing. She does this often, sits with a sketch pad and colored pencils and renders the world around her with an attention that amazes me. Today she is drawing the marigolds. She has gotten the orange almost exactly right. I am beside her, drinking tea, watching the light move across the courtyard as the afternoon shifts toward evening. I did not need to say another word to Richard or Carol. Not one. The evidence said everything. The truth said everything. And I walked away from them the way you walk away from a fire, quietly, without looking back, into open air. June is here, alive, drawing flowers on a spring afternoon, and I am here beside her. That has always been enough. Here is what I want to know. Was I right to let the legal process handle everything without ever confronting my parents face to face? Some people might say I owed them a conversation before going to the police. Others might say that anyone who steals money meant to save a child's life does not deserve a conversation at all. And what about the moment my mother told me to stop being upset about the room while June was in the hospital? Do you think she genuinely believed she was right, or did she know exactly what she was doing? If your parents had done what mine did, would you have filed the report immediately? Or would you have given them a chance to explain themselves first? I want to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. If you believe people should face the consequences of their actions, hit subscribe. I have got more stories of justice that will blow your mind.